Season 7 is now over, which means I have a daunting task left to do, which is to sum up the good and the bad in this season and see where it lies. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a season-ending edition of Pones N Stuff. Over the last year, I've come to appreciate Season 6 a hell of a lot more than I did when it was airing, because I threw accusations at it that it was a bit inconsistent. Well, after seeing Season 7 unfold before my eyes, I have to tip my hat to what came before it, because Season 6 ended up becoming my best reviewed season of this show to date, which meant before an episode had even aired, Season 7 had a mountain to climb. And well, when I said Season 6 was quote-unquote inconsistent, I had absolutely no idea what Season 7 would be throwing at me, and it left me with a very distinct impression now it's ended a month after that fact, as it came across like a person living with bipolar disorder, a simile that I believe many of you could find offensive, but when you actually break it down, it makes a lot of sense, as thanks to severe mood swings, it couldn't make up its mind whether it wanted to live life to the fullest or commit structural, stylistic, or entertainment suicide from week to week, not being able to bear with what it had to deal with. And you know what? The effect that this has had on it is so apparent that even the clueless Inspector Gadget could see it with that collection of fried circuits that he has and inevitably somehow calls a brain. I really wish I could be positive here, I really want to, but there's a small problem with that. With Dan Ingram and a lot of the show's creators working on the feature film, it left this season with not a lot of pieces to pick up, and inevitably it led to a lot of laziness and complacency, which allowed a fluctuation in quality to happen that was so stark and apparent that I really lost confidence. Because if you have season episodes going from good to bad, good to bad, good to bad so often, you really have no idea what you're getting yourself into, and it causes a lot of disarray. Now, I could easily explain this, but thankfully, I have a graph detailing all to really highlight just how much of a problem this was. Talking about those peaks and troughs isn't the same as seeing how they look. They're so frequent. No wonder my sanity was lost over the course of the last 7 to 8 months. Now sure, it petered out in fluctuation towards the tail end of proceedings, but that meant that poor episodes replaced it for the most part, with only a few good markings in that time to compensate. The season began with something completely different, something that had never been done before, and it was the biggest shake-up, I believe, that the show has ever done, as it had no two-parter premiere, instead throwing Starlight's future right into the forefront, as Celestial Advice proved to be a solid emotional episode, but it never managed to get away from its weighty subject matter, as the lack of time made it limp across the line. But it followed up with All Bottled Up, that showcased Trixie and Starlight's relationship as a tour de force in comedy and drama that renewed hope that we could be in for a good 24 to come. Now, while a flurry of emotions built on Florrie Hart's development and gave Twilight one of the best performances she had all year, we soon went on the decline as Fluttershy's atrocious season started where it finished, as she lent in and got nothing out of it, while Rock Solid Friendship wasn't on a stable footing as it may have anticipated to be, as another Maud and Pinky episode struggled to be relevant, as the pairing has, in my opinion, finally lost its X factor. Parental guidance, though, rocketed off the back of Forever Philly's feels-inducing sledgehammer to give us character development for Rainbow, Rarity, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle that was bountiful and important as they delivered series-defining performances, while Rainbow's parents and the core of Sweetie Belle and Rarity's relationship went under the microscope in grand fashion. However, hard to say anything undid all of that effort by putting in a regressive and mind-numbingly tedious CMC and Big Mac experience that left me aghast with frustration in what was no doubt the worst episode of the season, even with Fluttershy Leans In following up not far behind. Another steady rise was put forward, with Honest Apple's stylistic flair raising it to higher than it honestly deserved, while A Royal Problem was an absolute joy, tackling Celestia and Luna's day-to-day life, with Starlight Glimmer offering up her best non-all bottled up performance as a whole. However, in what will sound like a broken record at this point and going on forward, another decline was on the horizon as Not Asking for Trouble floundered under the predictable and frustrating weight of its belligerent yak populace, while Discordant Harmony tried to steady the ship, but Discord and Fluttershy's best overall performances this season only could do so much as to highlight its failings with a lack of substance, leading to a marginal increase instead of the dramatic improvement that many would have expected, which led to the first half of the season looking as polarizing as one would believe, given how from week to week you really did not have any idea what you were going to get. And as I've already noted, that is quite troubling. On top of that, we also had the episodes being leaked en masse by Canadian networks and networks in other countries, meaning, honestly, you couldn't tell what was happening, because there were episodes happening weekly in the US, which we all checked up on, and there were others who'd already seen 4, 5, maybe 6 episodes ahead by looking forward in another country, meaning a lot of hype and a lot of anticipation for a lot of these episodes ended up going into the toilet, which meant obviously low viewing figures in other places, which doesn't reflect very well on us and the network in question. The fact is, though, we did reach a middle point with the hiatus just before Not Asking for Trouble, not looking in the best form. However, of course, we ended up, just like the bloody premiere, with a 2-episode chunk when we returned. Now, I've already noted Discordant Harmony's disappointing outing, but it did manage to return with a bang on the other end. The perfect pair may have matched A Royal Problem in ratings numbers, but it towered over its contemporary in its quality, thanks to its emotive weight, continuity and lore building that was well worth the 7 years of toil to see happen. It gave us this show at its most mature, and it's something that I wish to see more of as its audience grows with it. It was an almighty triumph that was only a few effects and transitions short of out-and-out perfection, and it was the rebound that this season needed. However, it didn't keep that momentum going for long, even though Fame and Misfortune came through and surprised thanks to the satirical genius of M.A. Larson picking apart fan culture. Now, this may have steadied the boat somewhat as Triple Threat drudged itself along by copying Not Asking for Trouble's premise, which alongside To Change a Changeling sandwiched the lore-heavy and entertaining campfire tales to rally home this season's now infamous inconsistent mantra, as an episode with tales of mythical heroes managed to achieve more than the socio-political issues between ponies, dragons, and changelings, proving that this formula of diplomacy may work in reality, but not prove its worth in animated television without a purpose at hand. And what I was hoping for after that was another resurgence to fit into this pattern that the season had seemingly become accustomed to, with Daring Dun's solid yet indecisive output delivering on what I expected. However, it isn't the main thing about you, a health of information, and Marks and Recreation's poor efforts once again put everything into negative equity as they either squandered their potential, lacked balance, or just out and out had nothing to offer in the first place as the tail end of the season struggled to swim back to dry land. But when it did, Once Upon a Zeppelin flew to the rescue as Twilight and her family provided one of the most unexpected successes of the season through the Princess of Friendship's compassionate turmoil. While Secrets and Pies wasn't the best episode ever, but it was still a lot better than it had any right to be, as it delivered comedy that so many episodes this season was lacking, while also giving Pinky her most rounded performance of the year too. Now, all seemed rejuvenated as Shadow Play delivered the quality writing, voice acting, morals, continuity, lore and world-building materials that you would expect of a great finale, but it lacked stylistically to challenge the best of its class. However, it recovered to generate a good rating, but it was still mired in the overbearing shadow that Uncommon Bond had put before it, as Sunburst and Starlight Glimmer's most important episode together was more of a hot mess than a joyous call to arms that ensured that this season's output looked as uncomfortable in its end as it did when it started, stuck in limbo as that inconsistent nature dealt one final blow. As you can tell, a season like this leads to a lot of indecision, because when you have so many amazing episodes, yet so many terrible ones, it leaves you with a lot of frustration, especially in my case, because I have no idea where I want to put this season amongst its brethren. Because how can it be so good, so fantastic, so representational of how good this show can be at its best, while also throwing in so many unnecessary negative ingredients that remind me, at its worst, how bad this show can be? I don't know. And it causes a lot of annoyance, irritation, and frustration that bleeds directly into my character of the season choice. And usually, this would be quite a simple thing to do, but this time, it's not an easy task at all. This was especially the case as I had to try and pick the character who I believe benefited the most from this, the most tumultuous of seasons. Last season's winner, Spike, was mostly an absent bystander, only appearing in one major leading role, as he wasn't given the chance to build on the substantial growth that he had accumulated in Season 6. Starlight Glimmer had a mixed bag, while Trixie started off valiantly, but tapered off with little to no fanfare, despite still producing the egotistical goods that we love, all while Fluttershy, a favourite of mine for many years, crashed and burned with her worst season in memory. Despite that though, many characters, most notably Twilight, Rainbow, Pinkie and Rarity, managed to deliver in their appearances even though their episode quality did count against them, as mostly new characters took the spotlight from them in others. As a result, I'm awarding my Character of the Season award to one who I believed had the most consistent, good appearances and made their episodes worth their time as a result. And you may be quite surprised by this choice: Princess Celestia. Because without her, celestial advice would have fallen on deaf ears, while a royal problem showcased a side of her that we rarely see, while Luna and Starlight helped buoy it up comprehensively. It showed more complexity for her than we've seen probably since the very start of the show, and arguably, thrusting her into the spotlight was one of this season's major triumphs amongst a sea of indecisions and poor mistakes. That decision seemed a lot harder on paper, but once I whittled down all the characters and saw their eligibility suffer beneath me, Princess Celestia was the only choice. Which is quite dumbfounding, because it shows how ridiculous this season is if the best character, who only made 2 appearances all season in major roles, ended up taking the crown over others who are more stable among it. If Princess Sunbutt is the only character that I found of worth in a season like this, it should highlight its quality quite justifiably, right? Looks like my mind is being made up ever so slowly. The good thing is that the songs did prove a lot easier than having to go through every other character and decide things, because, to be said, we didn't have a lot to pick from. To prove that point, we only had 5 musical numbers this season, thanks to the feature film taking the other 5 that I'm sure would have helped pad in the issues that some episodes had. Flawless was the rousing rallying cry to tolerance, self-reflection and understanding amongst frustrated opinion divergence. You're in My Head Like a Catchy Song was the most emotive of bricks to the face that I've ever seen in animated television outside of Steven Universe, while Best Friends Until the End of Time is arguably one of the most fun songs this show has ever done, all while fitting surprisingly well melodically and in tempo with the first verse of Slipknot's Psychosocial. Now, if you don't believe me, I've stuck a link in the description that'll prove it's well worth watching. Just trust me on it. If you don't laugh, I do not know where your heart or soul is. However, on the opposite side of the spectrum, Blank Flanks Forever was as impactful as a damp flannel, while the battle for Sugar Bell, despite having dueling genre diversity, continues Big Mac's poor run of musical form, showing a severe decline from his debut in the Ponytones' Find the Music in You 3 seasons prior, as this number stands as one of the worst this show has done, and it sits alongside Pinkie Pie's near unanimously terrible collection of Season 1 ditties. However, it does not go as low as Big Mac's worst, and that is Sisterhood. It does not reach that level of cringe. That's a song I never want to hear again. Good lord, Big Mac, just when I thought you couldn't stoop any lower, you just about managed managed to, and I'm not feeling too happy about that, even when you had someone else singing alongside you. All in all, while I could see the positive aspect of having 3 good songs and 2 really, really bad ones, it still comes across as a mixed bag, and it shows what happens when Mr. Ingram is distracted by a larger project. Now I'm hoping that Season 8 can lead us to hearing his work back at its frequent best, because it's very rare that I'm ever disappointed by Mr. Ingram's work, because it's always very fun to hear. And I'm hoping we get much more musical numbers to ensure that we don't get episodes bereft of musical vigour for large stretches again. Because if that wasn't there, I'm pretty sure Season 7 would have looked a darn sight better than it actually did. Speaking of that larger project, it would be amiss of me to go through this review without looking at the biggest thing that happened in Brony and Pony communities this season, the release of the My Little Pony movie in cinemas. Now, the fact is, I can't shy away from how much of a detriment to this season it ended up being. That being said, regardless of that fact, it was still highly anticipated by many. While I can't give you my full, in-depth critical analysis of the film just yet, I can offer you my casual observations. Now overall, I was left happy with what I saw coming out of the cinema, as the animation and music that made me love this show in the first place were turned up to 11 as it highlighted Friendship is Magic at its most bombastic. And it should prove how much I love the musical numbers, because I went straight out to HMV afterwards and bought the freaking soundtrack. Good lord, the songs were lovely. And of course, the film was about as fun as you would expect having watched this show for a long time, but there were some mature moments that I really didn't see coming, especially coming from a film that had a U rating. My god, they threw themselves out of left field, and I was really surprised. Now, sure, I would have appreciated the season ending first, before it was released, and that it made itself apparent where in the blue hell in the series timeline it actually fit. But I can't get everything I want, can I? Not after this season, that's for sure. And at the end of the day, there were 4 things that I took away from it. The texture of the Pones was like marshmallows, Liev Schreiber's Storm King portraying the MLP equivalent of Hank Scorpio from The Simpsons in every appearance was sublime. We Got This was mentioned so many times it sent me into Gloriosa Daisy flashbacks every damn time. And finally, Shannon Chan Kent arguably displayed her finest Pinky singing performance across the board. My god, woman, you have a fantastic set of pipes. And you could not have portrayed Pinky's enthusiasm, whimsy and charm better than you did in this film. I tip my hat off to you. Sadly, you're going to have to wait a year to get my full, unabridged opinions on this. In due time, all will become clear. That being said though, it's time for the period of reflection to end as I take this season to court and judge it one last time with my final thoughts on the subject. If you weren't aware already, let me spell it out to you in the plainest form of English I can. This season frustrated me to high hell. While it managed to break a record of having the most A-graded episodes over the course of its run with 4, which I broke last season's record of 3, it contrasted that with nearly half this season going under average on my rating scale, with most of them going below 10 out of 25, which for me is unacceptable. Now it's obvious that the work on the feature film blighted what this season could accomplish, and it rang loud and true with many episodes existing with no real purpose. Then again, how they managed to buoy that up with some of the most important episodes of the show to date really does prove how much of a Jekyll and Hyde operation we got here. Starlight Glimmer, the Cutie Mark Crusaders and Spike, the stars of last season, floundered while many characters had enough momentum to make themselves known but were left out of breath on many occasions, which stifled them. Hell, starting out with a non-traditional 2-parter was a sign of inconsistent things to come, and it soldiered on throughout. And while I may sound extremely critical, because a lot of you actually like this season, God only knows why, but I will respect your opinion if it is indeed the case. The point does still remain though that for me, Not since season 3 have I been this irritated with what Friendship is Magic has given to me, and that was down to a low amount of episodes, diminishing returns, and sudden shocks out of nowhere as it built for season 4, giving it something to really praise on its high horse by also disappointing with some of the worst episodes I've ever seen. This time around though, with a full 26 episode calendar and a team of writers, directors and animators lacking on creative spark, we could potentially have seen this show's lowest point. However, on episode ratings alone, this season averaged out to rank higher than seasons 1 and 3. Yes! Even season 1, a season that actually, on reflection, has a lot of really good episodes. Some of my favourites reside in that season. And yet, this one, so inconsistent, managed to go above it? I bet you're wondering how. Well, those 4 A-grade episodes surely had a part to play, and it can thank its extremely lucky stars that they were there, because if they weren't, this season could have actually finished below number 3. And I didn't think that was technically possible. So here we go, it nearly damn well happened, and I'd love to try and finish this review of the season on a positive note, given that we actually had a decent amount on offer when it came through. However, it's proven harder than expected, especially when you have to look at its negatives so intensely. It's hard to fight against it, and as a result we get this quite somber mood coming out of it. Overall, I think we can say this season struck lucky by being able to rebound from its failings well, but it's left in its wake a testing time ahead for the show, where season 8 will really need to hit the ground running and give us an example of what this show is capable of to rebuild trust, because if it can't, then that will be a very worrying sight to see. And with those words, it is time to end, as Pones N Stuff will be returning in the spring of 2018 to start this analytical merry-go-round all over again. And I look forward to seeing you all there to enjoy it once more, because it's been an absolute joy to get all of this stuff out, and I cannot wait for what season 8 has in store. I have been Freddie Thomas, you've been people watching. This has been a Pones N Stuff end of season review for the CC Network. And I will see you all next time.